The Nuspa team that's not here.
Oh, so you know about.
He knows.
Okay, that's good. So the vast majority of issues that are contentious in Singapore, okay, come down to or boil down to one of these few things, right? Like race, politics, education, NS, immigration, inequality, things like that. Okay. Of course, this is not an extensive list of things that are controversial or contentious. As some of you might remember from last year's SSDC quarterfinals, it involves things like parking for teachers and stuff. But I'm not going to talk about the less important stuff. Okay, in the hopes that by covering all of this, we get a nice overview of issues facing or unique to Singapore, and as a result, a lot of the arguments and examples will apply. So this will be relatively matter heavy. Okay, like I'll be feeding you a lot of information and examples. I will also require, as far as possible, you guys to have quick access to like Google or whatever, because a lot of the information is in my head, but I do need to fact check some of them, right? Or like keep like what's the latest update? Okay. Anyway, so let's start with race, okay? Because a lot of the subsequent issues that we'll talk about will have elements of race as part of the reasons for particular policies and the like. Okay? And let's start with a very simple question, which I guess is appropriate for this room. Is racism a thing in Singapore?
Yeah.
Ask the minority. Minority.
Who's minority? Minority what
Minority.
what minority? Sorry?
I think it exists.
You think it exists? You're a minority, you look Chinese. Malay?
Cultural China.
Okay. Good. Some minority, come, tell me. Why does I can do that because I'm a minority also, right? Why does racism exist? Or in what forms does it manifest?
I think in terms of culture, like my parents, they think that Chinese are too calculative in things.
Okay.
And then, but for us Malays, if someone forgets like some debt, we just forgive them and then just move on. Yeah.
Okay, so that's your parents,
Yeah.
right? Which admittedly are in their 40s,
50s.
50s, right? So actually same age as my parents. So these people were born at the age of Singapore's independence. And Singapore back then was very different and very racist. I mean, of course you've heard of things like racial riots and the like. But I'm asking about you today as a millennial. What is your experience of racism in Singapore? Because, okay, the reason why I'm actually having this discussion first is because for the vast majority of you who are Chinese, okay, and who are perhaps less woke, right, may not actually realize that racism is perhaps a thing and realize the ways in which it manifests, right? Because once you acknowledge that as the premise, then you will understand the reason for a lot of policies and why at face value it might seem messed up, but if you think about it, if you accept and acknowledge the pernicious ways in which racism invades our lives, then the justification of policies are there, right? And often a lot of it requires you to justify the fact that people are racist. Okay, yes, so what is your personal experiences with racism?
I can't really think anything out of my head. Maybe being excluded from events.
Like?
A lot of the events, like previously in my secondary school, like they only invited Chinese people and like
What sort of events?
football events, sitting events, birthday events, things like that. Yeah.
Why do you think that was a factor of race as opposed to maybe you just didn't have friends?
Because I felt that they saw Muslims as a liability, like they need to order food properly for us there.
Right.
And like need to avoid things like gambling and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good thing, right? As in, that's a good example, sorry. Oh, I think that's a good thing. Okay, sorry, I'm quite tired. So, one of the ways in which it manifests for Malay Muslim people is, obviously a lot of these stereotypes exist, right? That the Malay Muslim community is lazy, they are criminals, they take drugs, that they don't work very hard, that it's too troublesome to include them because of their religious requirements, right? So while the worst stereotypes do exist, particularly with the older generation, I don't think it suffers as much today, simply because of the fact that we have a large amount of integration within our community, right? So to what extent does it exist? And this is where learning about microaggressions is important, right? Right? So, for example, what's your name? Minority? What? Hakim, right? So, I don't know what's your GPA, I'm not going to ask you, okay? But let's assume, right? So we have a conversation with Hakim, and he says, oh, he has a 4.0 GPA. It's like, wow, so smart, right? It's those sort of comments that imply that he's not supposed to be smart, and it's often a function of his race, right? Because Malays generally don't do well academically, right? You see that throughout schools when you look at your PSLE scores on average, that they don't do as well. The vast majority of people in ITE often are from minority groups, but that's for a whole different host of other reasons, right? So there are easily comments like this, wow, so smart, right? Can do so well. Wow, can go university, right? Those are what we call microaggressions, right? So, for example, a different example of microaggressions that occurred to me, right? I very often get questions about whether I'm Singaporean. Okay? To you, it seems like an innocuous question, but I guarantee that you've been asked that less than 5 times in your life, perhaps even less than 3 times in your life. Okay? The reason why I get asked that question is what? Yes, Justin.
Oh, I get asked every day.
Because you sound a bit different.
Microaggression.
You have a slight accent, right? That's a bit different. Okay?
Beard and everything.
Maybe the Chinaman beard right? The microaggression. Anyway, so the reason why I get asked that very often is entirely because, or the assumption is that there is a preconceived notion of what a Singaporean looks like. Right? So, like, people ask me, are you Singaporean? Yes. Or were you born and bred here? Right? So, there's an assumption that I'm an immigrant, I'm foreign, I'm an expat, I have foreign origins. Right? Because I don't look Singaporean. But the question is, what does it mean to look Singaporean, right? Even though I wear shorts and slippers, I dress very similarly to Alfred, right? But I still get asked these questions, right? So microaggressions are a real issue, and I would say that it's the final frontier in terms of overcoming racism, right? So Haikal and I, Haikal, right?
Hakim.
Oh my goodness. See? Okay, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
I'm just tired. So Hakim and I, we might not face flat out racism, but the sort of innocuous comments do apply, okay, and they do hurt and do cause problems. Why do microaggressions exist? Because stereotypes still exist, and people don't admit to having those stereotypes, right? And they inform daily interactions. Okay, so that's why you assume, for example, just because I'm Indian, I would like Indian food, when that's not the case, or rather that I don't like Indian food, that I eat all kinds of food all the time, and Indian food actually forms a minority in my diet, right? So because of those stereotypes, that is why people make those sort of comments, because of ignorance. And there's a reason for that, because even though we are forced to integrate with one another, right? We have the ethnic quotas in HDB flats. Do you guys know about that?
Yep.
Right? We have things like the fact that schools are mixed, are not segregated according to race. The fact is, a lot of us still remain within ethnic bubbles, right? That the onus is often on minorities to make friends that are not outside of, that are outside of our race, but the rest of you, right, don't often have that burden. That it's possible for you to live your entire life talking only to Chinese people. Okay? And there's nothing making sure that you have a sufficient understanding of different cultures and different races, right? For example, I guarantee half of you cannot tell me what is the difference between Hari Raya Haji and Hari Raya Puasa. You cannot.
I actually don't know.
Yet Hakim can probably explain what the Hungry Ghost Festival is all about, right? I mean, okay, if you cannot, then big problem for you, lah, right? So the fact is, the extent of your cultural knowledge really stems from just racial harmony day and dressing up in different like racial ethnic costumes. That's about it.
Wow, that's
Right?
fasting, right? Is it?
Wow, that is
Like
fasting.
and
Hard-
Haji is the
year.
people who make the pilgrim. No, when they make the pilgrimage.
Okay, but for those who don't make the pilgrimage, what do they do?
Oh, the one. Yeah.
So, Hakim, what does Hari Raya Haji, what is it all about?
Hari Raya Haji is basically celebrating like